I was in the sauna yesterday, just pondering on the whole neurons that fire together, wire together thing. Amazing. But let's talk about the firing. What gets them fired up? When is the optimal time for wiring? Like, are there multiple types of neurons? I mean, like, what's a neuron anyways? Here's the thing. We get that the wiring is in the repetition, but how the F do we get ourselves to repeat that which we're habitually conditioned to now resist? Well, I am about to offer my 69 cents. So stick around because we are going to have fun today. Welcome to I Am Divine AF. This is not just a podcast. It's an anthem for the souls ready to reclaim their divinity and break free into their highest destiny. My mission is to help you answer the casual "how are you?" with "I've never been fucking happier." So buckle up as we go on a journey to debunk divinity and liberate the only thing that creates your reality, your consciousness. Episodes will be engineered with spiritual empowerment that awaken your superconscious, activate your divine gifts, and help you live the legacy you always dreamed of. One divine aligned step at a time. Let's make magic, people, and have the time of our lives while doing it. When the pain is seen as pleasure is when you climax in divinity. That's my little hypothesis for this episode. And the thing is, as a species, we are naturally pain avoidant and pleasure seeking. But why does that matter? It matters because I believe it relates to how habits themselves are formed. And our brain is just a huge grid of electrical circuitry. So like the little signals firing between these things called neurons, and these neurons are just electrical and chemical communicators. Think of them as like sculptors of experience, if you shall. They're the instructors, they're communicating what we should experience. Now, when they fire, that's like a little spark from a matchstick. Like, that's the fire, the stimulus. The stimulus is what the brain responds to. And in habit formation, it normally goes something like this. The cue, the craving, the response, the reward cycle. So that's the loop. Repeated, it becomes the habit. It's just one big dopamine fun fest until it's not so fun anymore, right? So the wiring is actually what creates the habit, but the firing is what triggers the habit to form. Eventually, you follow this flow enough times that the anticipation of the reward from the cue jacks you up to live out the practice response. That's dopamine association. And the body is in that like me likey vibe. It's just like more and more and more of this. So the smell of pizza might have done nothing to you if you never ate the pizza. But if when you smell the pizza, you eat the pizza, then eventually the smell alone is an open dopamine loop that creates an intense craving for closure, i.e. get that pizza in my mouth. Now the dopamine is the feel-good pleasure hormone, but it's not actually about the reward itself. Interestingly, it's about the anticipation of the reward, which is crazy. And this is why scrolling social media feels compulsive. This is why they don't show us all the content at once. Because when we can't see what's coming, we're in anticipation, right? This is called the variable reward schedule. And it's the same principle that slot machines use. Fun fact. Fun fact. And I never forgot this. I heard this so long ago. Facebook hired behavioral experts, including those with casino industry experience, to optimize the infinite scroll and notification system because uncertainty is so addictive. So anticipation is the game. But I've got questions. I have got a few questions. If dopamine is just about the anticipation, then why even fulfill the response? Dopamine's like this ultimate hype-up motivator, and it really gets you to take action, but it doesn't guarantee satisfaction. It's more about motive. So it's this like little sidekick pushing us towards that which will secure survival with, as well as a bonus, hopefully getting some pleasure too. So think of dopamine as the fuel, not the finish line. But I wanted to clarify this and understand why. So according to the architect, the evolutionary reason for this is that our ancestors needed a system that kept them chasing food, mates, and shelter before they got them. See, if dopamine only fired after, then survival odds would plummet. So here we are. Dopamine itself is likely not to satisfy us. This is why we stay in the craving cycle. And then we repeat, leading to our habits. Because the thing is that a habit isn't just one firing equals wiring. It's repeated firings, strengthening the wiring. Now grab the popcorn, because this is what my favorite little rabbit hole was revolved around, the Holy Grail question. If not dopamine, then what actually creates pleasure? And I don't have a lot of time, because New Moon Slow and Strong Yoga, first time trying it, it's kicking off soon. But I'll just lightly touch on pleasure, pun intended. Pleasure. The sweet orgasmic symphony of chemicals. That is if you're just looking at it from the neuroscience lens. But there are tons of ways to derive pleasure. Now, when looking at the brain, we've already talked about dopamine. The anticipation, the motivation, the craving, the chase. We know that gives some type of pleasure. Just ask any fuckboy. But we've also got the endorphins. The endorphins in the brain are all about the relief, the release, the pain reduction. This is what's also known as runner's high. We've got serotonin, the happiness molecule or the happiness hormone. That leads into contentment, balance, safety, and that gives a lot of vibes around long-term well-being, and that does create pleasure. Now, oxytocin, the OG oxy is like, as I call it, because I'm a hugger, right? So I just be like hugging people all the time, and you have to hug them for 10 seconds to get the oxy released. But this is one of my favorite sources of pleasure because it's bonding, it's intimacy, it's the pleasure of connection. And I really believe it builds so much warmth and trust. Now, pleasure is not just pleasure though, right? It's so much more than how the chemicals create pleasure through our brain and our circuitry. And of course, the firing is the spark, and if that firing happens in anticipation, like seeing cake, then we have the dopamine that's in dominator mode. If we have the pleasure at the point of firing where it's the moment of consumption, like eating cake, then we've got endorphins and serotonin. But if it happens at the time of intimacy, like I mentioned, like hugging someone, then we've got oxytocin. But the brain doesn't really distinguish between real versus imagined firing. This is why visualization, ritual, prayer, and even placebo can activate our pleasure pathways. What a fucking vibe. But this isn't just about pleasure, it's about the pain that comes from the pleasure we keep satisfying when we satisfy it in the wrong ways and it becomes toxic habits. Enter the binge addiction spiral. Chasing anticipation and never reaching real fulfillment. So we don't keep scrolling because the content is so good. We keep scrolling because dopamine tricks us into thinking the next hit will finally be satisfying. That's not pleasure, that's just misfiring. So if we only stay in neurology, we reduce pleasure to molecules and misfires. But true pleasure is neuro-spiritual. It's a fusion of the nervous system, which I actually call the safety system, and the soul's frequency. So instead of nervous system regulation, we want safety system resonance, which is a soul frequency approach to pleasure. So pleasure beyond the brain, what does the neuro-spiritual lens look like? So at the neurological level, the misfire, pleasure is just reduced to dopamine anticipation. Cue, craving, response, crash. Leaving us very unsatisfied and stuck in this loop that we'd rather be like, exit stage left, I'm out of here. But it's never that easy. Now, the spiritual level of this, where the truth resides, is that pleasure is not in the consumption, but in the resonance. So when mind, body, and soul vibrate in coherence, that is the difference between a nervous system and a safety system. That's what creates deep safety, and that creates a truly pleasurable state because instead of chasing, you're actually receiving. You're receiving those floods of pleasure from your divine source energy and channel. Now, the neuro-spiritual bridge is that we look at firing neurons not just as stimulus, but as signals inviting us into alignment. So the firing's not going to stop because we live in Most of us live in overstimulated environments. But when we can start to differentiate and see these as signals inviting us into alignment, then we're addressing potential misfires. Because the pleasure misfires are when we assign the cue to a distortion, something that's not going to leave us satisfied. And there's a big difference between satisfaction and fulfillment, but it's not going to leave us satisfied, but that lack of satisfaction is also going to leave us highly unfulfilled. Now, pleasure purifies when we imprint the cue into coherence. So that means like we are in breath, we are in prayer, we are in gratitude, we are in stillness. And pleasure at this level, listen, I didn't know till I knew. Because this is all, you guys have been hearing me talk about this experiment, and it wasn't until I was moaning as if I was sounding like I was having an orgasm, and I was just drinking water in the sauna, and I was like, good Lord, this whole little pleasure protocol that I've got going is really starting to deliver. It's give me more. Yes, please. But we'll talk about that later because there's so much more to cover. To wrap this up, I just wanted to touch on the difference and the evolution of what pleasure could be and the sacred power of pleasure, because science tells us pleasure is dopamine. But dopamine is just the doorbell. True pleasure is the body and soul answering the door together. That's neuro-spiritual pleasure, not chasing an empty high, but resting in divine resonance. So we've got neurological pleasure, anticipation, craving, crash, and we've got neuro-spiritual pleasure, resonance, fulfillment, coherence. And I know that these words might not like land fully in your logic, but hopefully you feel them in your heart and soul. And this is a big part of my work, is looking at frequency distortion versus frequency resonance. Now, resonance is when your nervous system, i.e. your safety system, is in harmony. It's in truth, it's in safety, it's in higher coherence, cravings align with true fulfillment, healthy love, nourishing food, sacred rituals, all the fucking blessed out shit. Now, distortion is when the craving loop is miswired. The hunger fires towards false satisfaction, binging, numbing, toxic behaviors. And that leads into addictions. And addictions are not always addictions in terms of I'm an addict to a highly frowned upon substance or behavior, like a gambling addiction or a cocaine addiction. Addictions, this is the biggest secret. There are a lot of legal things that we have addictions around. We have addictions around food. We have addictions around alcohol, around vaping, around porn. We have addictions around money. We have addictions around lust and attention. We have addictions around validation. We have addictions around all kinds of things. And these craving cycles are what lead into, inverted commas, toxic behaviors, and even into binging, because we're chasing the relief, right? The false satisfaction. But really all you're doing is amplifying emptiness, right? So let me just honor the elephant in the room and say, we all have the cravings, but our cravings are the portal of creation. And the cravings we satisfy are the lies we end up creating. So my invitation to you, as I sign off, getting ready to sway my way into this little yoga sesh, is just to be willing to hold the space after the fire. Be willing to sit in the fire, because that's where we phoenix. That's where the true resonance is found. So, love, light, and all things divine. I cannot wait to expand on this next time, because this experiment's life-giving at the moment, and there's so much. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what the next evolution of my work is, and I can't wait to share more and more and more of it with you, just holding it in divine and sacred spaces as it bursts through me. So stay happy, stay aligned, stay divine, and we will catch up soon.